Joel, my friend, welcome to Long Blue Leadership.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad to chat with you.
Oh gosh, well, we are excited for this. It's going to be just a filled conversation of incredible insights, and you have so much to share. And I think what's really special about this is how we're going to touch into AI because it is relevant and it's everywhere now. But I actually want to dial it back first to a very specific moment in time, and it's probably an area that had really transformed your life, right? So you went through a stage 4 cancer. I mean, not many people can say that they have gone through that and survived it. And I think it also really impacted others in your family. Can you just share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so back in 2010, I was flying on top of the world. I was going through the interview process for the Air Force Thunderbirds, and I found out of nowhere that I had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. So within just a couple of weeks, I went from feeling like I was at the peak of good health to now being told that I had about 18 months to live and a 15% chance to live 5 years. And those would be a pretty gruesome 5 years if I did make it that far. And so that was the new reality that I had to contend with.
I can't even imagine that. I mean, just was there some kind of indication? Like you went in and you were checked up and they found this? I mean, it just, wow, just boom.
It's funny. I actually have to credit the flying role with most likely diagnosing and solving this for me early because when I would fly and I'd have my G suit on my abdomen, it would inflate against me when I pull G's, and it was a pain that I was experiencing on the right side of my abdomen, that right around my appendix. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was like a 2, so nothing big, but big enough that when I went and saw the flight surgeon for my annual physical, I mentioned it and I said, "I'm sure it's nothing." But they did the right thing and did some quick tests and ultrasound on that area and some MRI work, and they were able to very quickly determine that I had a big tumor grown in that spot.
Wow. Well, I guess right there, just a lesson off the bat is, listen to your body, your body. And if something doesn't feel right, seem right, say something and get it checked out.
That's
So,
exactly right.
oh my goodness. Okay. So you got that diagnosis. You're sitting there with that information. How do you process that? What is the conversation with your wife? What's the next step when you're given some kind of timeline like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would have thought, having gone through like fighter pilot training and even the Air Force Academy and all the things that build resilience in life, that I would have felt more prepared for that moment. And in other words, that I would have felt more prepared than the average individual, but I did not. I felt very much like I was in a catastrophe from which I couldn't see how to get through the day-to-day activities. I was a zombie around the house, and I really relied on my wife and my family stepping in to help me. And so for a good couple months, it was just kind of inconsolable. I always like to say I would wake up and go through my day very, very tired because I didn't sleep the night before, and then I'd go to bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning, trying to figure out, any options that I would have to extend my life for my kids to remember me a little bit. I had a 1 and a 3-year-old, and so I went through life for a couple of months just a zombie and doing very poorly.
So, what changed in that couple of months that, I guess, changed the trajectory of how you looked at things or how you approached or what happened?
Yeah, there's a great quote that I repeat a lot, which I think makes a lot of sense, which is the dying have the most to teach us about life. And what it really means is that when you're faced with these types of struggles, that all of a sudden, whether you're 80 or 33, like I was, you get a certain amount of clarity, right, in that moment, and it's good for eliminating the rest of the noise in your life and identifying what's most important and what should have been most important all along, and that comes through and is in the forefront. It was fascinating to me that the moment I got the diagnosis, immediately I was mad at myself for spending any extra time at work. Like, it was like a light switch in my head went off and said, like, "You shouldn't have stayed that extra hour at work just to watch the clock turn. You were done with your job." I had a boss at the time that I wasn't a huge fan of, and he was a clock watcher and wanted
Yeah.
just to be in there to fill the time. And my mind immediately went to, now my finite resource is time, and I've been wasting it. And I remember vowing that I'll never waste my time again. And I've been very disciplined against letting anybody steal time from me from that point forward. That was one of the key things I took away. And then looking back in my life, there were things I regretted, things that I celebrated and that I was proud of, and also considered what I would do differently if I was given a second chance.
So, You wrote a book called Survivor's Obligation. I'm curious about this journey, though, because obviously you beat it. 15 years
Yeah.
later, you're here. So, you beat the odds of the 18 months. And what was that like when you still had to provide for your family? You were still working. Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah, first of all, I have to credit the Air Force with showing up in a huge way at that time. I was watching other people in the civilian sector who were undergoing cancer struggles, and they had a much more difficult time than I did. The Air Force
Mm.
had stepped in and was making meals around the clock for my family. I didn't have to show up to work. They afforded me every opportunity to get better, and I really credit the Air Force family with getting me through that period of time in ways I just certainly would not have been able to get through on my own. Uh, and in terms of like how I looked at my life,
Hmm.
as I was thinking about the things I was proud of and the things I regretted, the things that I was proud of, I was a little surprised by, and the things I regretted, I was surprised by. I didn't regret my failures, of which there were many. I didn't regret them because, what I actually regretted were those times that I didn't try, were those times where I didn't make the effort into doing something new that was a little bit scary, that would have put me outside of my comfort zone, maybe would have challenged my ego a little bit. And now the end of my life was here, and I'd never have a chance to do anything else. This is my story was complete. And I said, really angry that had I gotten a second chance, I would do things very differently. I love being a fighter pilot, but I would have preferred it to have been a chapter in my life, not the entire book. I would have, tried to go to the business world and done all these things. And when I did get that second chance, and basically God called my bluff and said, "All right, let's see if you actually follow through with this." Then, of course, I had to hold myself accountable to living differently in that next chapter.
So that's what you're doing now. You're living in this next chapter. And so, I mean, I think there's a transition out of the military. Obviously, you retired as a lieutenant colonel. And so, talk us a little bit about in this moment of what you're going to do if given a second chance. Let's talk about what some of those things that you took a chance on, maybe in the business world first.
Sure. So our mutual friend, Kopechek, called me
Oh,
up and
yes.
said, he says, I'm in the middle of my Texas Longhorn MBA right now. It's amazing. It's just on the street from you. He knew he was following my cancer struggle closely. And he said, look, you're 2 years into this journey. Who knows what the future holds? But, I talked to him about wanting to be in the business sector and trying something new. And he said, "If you're serious about that, you should join the MBA program." And so that's what I did. I went and joined the MBA program and had a blast being the dumbest guy in the room by far in business school. And at the same time, it almost reminded me of being a fighter pilot again, or at least the early days of being a fighter pilot, because it was a little bit of a combination of terror and exhilaration, which is really what I loved about being a fighter pilot. That the first time you go upside down by yourself and in pilot training and you prove yourself you can do it, you're a little bit terrified, but fully exhilarated and knowing that this is exactly what you should be doing at the same time. I had that same sentiment as I'm sitting in business school classes, as I'm trying to keep up with the conversation there. And you say, well, that's so different from flying a plane faster than space on how you're getting the same joy out of it. And it's really because where I landed with, what did I value most in life? It came down to the times when I was on an elite team with an inspiring mission. An elite team, meaning I felt like I didn't deserve that spot there. And the little secret was everybody on the elite team didn't feel like they deserved that spot there, but boy, are they going to try to earn it. And then that inspiring mission that we're pursuing, whether it was our time at the Air Force Academy, I always felt like I didn't deserve to be there. I felt like that was an incredibly elite team. We're in an inspiring mission. Felt the same way about being a fighter pilot, had a healthy dose of imposter syndrome going through all of this. But I've learned to believe that that's a bit of a superpower in a sense, because if you have imposter syndrome coupled with a growth mindset, which means I don't belong here today, but I can sure earn the right if I try hard, I think that helps us to really realize the full potential of our lives.
Mm. Really well said. And I think that actually kind of helps us see how you're able to make that transition. I want to go back to the fact, first off, Cope is amazing. I love that it talks about the long blue line and our networks from the Air Force Academy. They really are for life. And I think, you just kind of it just showed that. Um, you applied and you participated in this MBA program when you're in your mid-30s then. Can you talk about, that a little bit? I think there's an interest in, "Oh, if I didn't do this in my 20s, it's too late." Can you talk about that transition in, your mid-30s, and do you think that was the right time? Can people do it later in their life, etcetera?
So I would say, you certainly can do it, at any point in life. You can recreate, yourself at any point. And a lot of, this is gonna go totally off topic, but a lot of longevity science is saying that the first person to live to be 150 is alive today, meaning we're all gonna see a lot more healthy years, hopefully,
Mhm.
in our lives than ever before. So that should mean that all of us should pursue multiple chapters, and there's certainly not a point in life where we're done reinventing ourselves. But the key is the word reinventing. And I was at a point in my career where at 33 years old, I was very, very comfortable flying. I was very, very comfortable doing air shows and flybys and leading missions and signing autographs. And so my identity was was a lot of ego and not a lot of growth. Meaning, it felt good to be told how great I was at doing a certain skill set, but it wasn't that hard to do anymore. It had become rote, and I wasn't growing at this point. In order to go into the business world, I had to completely reinvent myself. And I like to tell people that are transitioning out of the military, as difficult as it was to do the first thing, whether that's be a fighter pilot or an intel officer, or how you had to reinvent yourself at 23 years old, that's just as challenging as it's going to be. You have to sign up again for the B course, as we call it, as fighter pilots, the thing that introduces you to being a fighter pilot, and realize that you're devoting that much effort to reinventing yourself. And people would push back and say, "Yeah, but you've already led in these environments. You have all of these things that should carry over. Wouldn't it be easier for you just to make a transition and less of that initiation energy that's required to start this new thing?" And the answer is no. You literally have to start it over as if you're 25 years old. You got to eat a lot of humble pie and realize you're not special in this environment. But the good news is you can become special very quickly if you're willing to reinvent yourself. Now you bring perspective that nobody else can carry. Nobody else knows how to navigate high stakes life or death environments like we've learned in the military. Nobody shows up with the processes that we've learned through checklists and through cultural training, all the things that maybe we didn't even aware that we're seeing. As soon as you see the opposite in the business world and you realize, wow, they don't have that great of a culture here. We had a great one in the military. That's a huge resource that you can bring into that environment, but only after you've completely reinvented yourself and translated your skill set into something that's meaningful for that business setting.
So, Joel, that's fascinating because what you're saying is you're almost stripping yourself of all these experiences to really open up your aperture for what's new. And I'm curious if this was a way you came into that. Did you go in with your eyes wide open with that plan, or did you learn this about yourself?
No, I came into it arrogantly. I went into these conversations, think, wait till they see how much I have to offer. I've been in very complex scenarios. I've led my way out of them. I have all these awards for being a good leader and a good instructor. And so just wait until they see what I've got to offer. And that's why business school helped me out a lot, because in a sandbox setting that really didn't have consequences, I got to participate in conversations and learned very quickly I didn't know what they were talking about. And that they had an understanding around business already that I didn't have. I didn't understand the language, and I needed to really re-educate myself to become ready in this moment. And so there's some moments in that period where I would have done very differently in approaching the next transition had I known how far I had to go to really having something to offer the business sector.
Was there a moment during that time when you were getting your MBA that uh, it in a way that cancer startled you as a life or death situation and you changed your, if I'm given a second chance, was there a moment in the business, getting your MBA where you like really like linked into like, this is what I'm going to be doing. It was so clear to you, the next, move in this journey.
Yeah, I'd say that, I mean, there's one that stands out that really showed how little I understood the business world. So they're talking about pipeline in this conversation at my MBA school, and they said, we need to improve pipeline. We're working on getting better pipeline for our needs. And I'm listening to this, thinking, what are they talking about? Is this like oil pipeline? Is this pipe plumbing? What do they mean? And for those in the business sector, of course, you understand they're talking about a sales pipeline. A sales pipeline is a sales funnel that shows the leads that turns into the sales and the conversion rate and all the things that of course I know intimately well now. At that point, it showed me that there's an entire language I just haven't been exposed to, because I'd been talking about missiles and G forces and airplanes for so long that it didn't matter how much experience I was bringing to the table. There was a language I didn't understand.
I think that is really, really thoughtful in how you share that because then it helped you probably in navigating when you're leading, other teams that have different experiences coming to the table. So when you learn that language, and I want to talk a little bit about, you've CEO of Afterburner. Let's just talk about your role in the civilian sector, your multiple roles. I'd love for you to share a couple of stories where you've grown as a leader and where you've continued to learn things about yourself in that space.
Yeah, so at Afterburner, what we end up doing at Afterburner more often than not was leading in keynotes, doing workshops for training. And what we would show them is how you can leverage the things that we learned in the military on the elite teams that we participated in, whether that's Green Beret, fighter pilot, Navy SEAL. We hired all those backgrounds and of course, look for teams that had a business degree on top of that. Uh, what we ended up doing was getting on stage in front of these folks and sometimes talking to 10,000 people. So I've done presentations in front of 10,000 people in my past. And what I was surprised by, thinking about the learning opportunities and where the growth came from, is that even after having done 3,000 briefings, in a fighter pilot setting and getting in front of the red flag team in Nellis and doing a
Mhm.
presentation there, I would be behind the scenes at some of these huge presentations, and I would get incredible stage fright, I guess is the only way to say it, butterflies. I would feel
Mm.
like I was gonna pass out. And the reason I share this is because I was frustrated that it didn't translate better to this new thing that I was looking to do with public speaking. Now I'm talking for an hour and I had to be engaging and comical at times and bringing the audience into it. I say that because once again, I was finding that combination of terror and exhilaration and proving to myself that I could do it. And I had a new place that I needed to grow into for that. Now I've done this enough times where my heart rate doesn't go up a beat when I do this at this point, but that's after doing thousands of presentations. And I think the key takeaway for me was our growth is never over with, and it's the growth that really feels good. And so leaning into those areas of discomfort has been something that's been really important to me my entire life, particularly after cancer.
Mm. So, what is growing you now? What is new for you that you are pursuing in your personal growth and development?
Yeah, so what's new for me now is what's new for society in this next era with AI. And AI is going to disrupt every one of our lives. And just as aggressively as AI disrupted my life with cancer, or excuse me, as cancer disrupted my life, or even becoming a fighter pilot or joining business school disrupted my life, we're going to see the same thing take place on a personal and professional level because of just how powerful this new technology is. And if you're sitting there wondering, well, it hallucinates still, and I don't really buy it, and we'll see where this ends up. I'm here to tell you, as somebody who's at the bleeding edge of AI, that's going to transform every single thing we do in very good ways, but also disrupt the way you think you add value today and the way you think that we should participate on teams right now. And so that's is going to disrupt everything. And so I'm looking to constantly reinvent myself in the context of this next era. And I'm also looking to lead our 2,400 person company at 8x8 on that same journey so that we can disrupt ourselves before we're disrupted.
So, what does that look like right now? So share something maybe that is on the leading edge of that, that forefront of being disruptive before you're disrupted in your organization.
Yeah, so for us, it's making this new technology as accessible as possible so that we can break down the barriers for using it and realizing that much like in the 90s, we went from only a small technical portion of the company that was using computers, then expanded to, of course, everyone in the company is using a computer. There's a computer on every desk. But that wasn't always like that. In the late 80s and in early 90s, that was just a reserved for a very technical portion of the group. Now that's expanded, and of course, everyone's on the net. You wouldn't dream of trying to get a job without being internet savvy and having computer skills. We're going to see the same thing take place with AI. And so, and I don't just mean using AI, I mean using AI to code, using AI to build things. And it's not just going to be reserved for that technical component of the company anymore. And so what that looks like for us, we conduct a weekly session where we talk about the use cases from the previous week on a personal and a professional level.
Mm,
Why is that important? Because now we're breaking down that barrier. So last week, I'll give you an example. We had somebody whose father passed a couple months ago,
mm,
and this person he lives in the UK. He's from Africa. His father had never met his son, so this person's grandson, his father's
okay.
grandson, he'd never met. And by using AI at his funeral, he was able to take their images and create a moment where they came together
Mm.
and hugged and picked up the grandson and played this really touching video for the rest of the people there to share in that moment that never really happened, of course, but was able to celebrate this person's life and that connection through the grandson. And it was just a really, I mean, there were people that were getting emotional talking about it, listening to the story. And then we have somebody else say, I had my basement flood and I took pictures of it and I used AI to imagine how we would have to renovate it and build it back better. And then somebody else says I successfully used AI to combat the tax increase on my house because I came up with good comparables from around the area and the good way to beat it. By the way, it's a really good one to use if you've
They're
not
just
if you haven't
mental note
yeah, if
right
you're trying
there.
to increase it. Exactly. So we're lowering the barriers on a personal level, so then when I tell you on a professional level, here are my expectations for how you'll bring AI to the table to accelerate the things you're already doing, the teams are ready to do that, and that's been a really important aspect of this journey.
Is it important for an organization to already have a culture that is open to, I think what, you're gonna get a bunch of different perspectives, you're gonna get maybe things thinking outside the box that you wouldn't have thought of. So, would you say that the organization was ready for that, or have you had to create that, culture along the way?
Yeah, I'd say, change is hard. Nobody likes change. We like being through change, and so one of the things that growth provides an opportunity to change for the better. But it's always start to get that activation energy to really pursue change. And so, what we had to teach the culture at 8x8 is to not be change weary, but to be change ready, and to understand that in this era, our ability to stay a couple months ahead of the rate of change will be a superpower, the likes of which no one can compete with us. Meaning, as difficult as it is to pursue this change and to continue reinventing yourself. And when I say reinvent yourself, I mean, if you're doing the same thing today in 6 months, then you're getting passed by it.
Mm.
Literally it's changing that fast. And we're seeing that inside of our company. And so the new constant will be change. The new constant will be disruption. And the faster we get comfortable with that, and the faster we realize that if we disrupt ourselves a little bit faster than the competition, that's a superpower. But we're already enjoying that internally within 8x8, but it's because we forced ourselves to get a little bit ahead.
That's really interesting, and I imagine, would you say that it takes, when you are in this transformation mode, because this is what you're taking your organization through, how are you coaching as a leader? How are you, maybe it's through the repetition of they're trying it in their personal life, but, what are you sharing from a leadership perspective that's helping them think that way constantly, right? I mean, it's different from, "Okay, I'm gonna do this today," but how are they constantly ingraining that into themselves, and how are you leading that?
Yeah, a couple of ways. One, we're saying that AI should be a thought partner in everything that we do. Maybe not a thought leader, meaning I'm not going to hand off a decision or an activity to AI per se, but literally in everything that we do. So I'll give you a quick example in your role. So you're doing podcasts, and these are amazing. And by the way, you're poised, and I'm not surprised after knowing you at the academy because you're very polished then. But this is incredible. You're doing a phenomenal job with this.
Thanks,
But
Joel.
maybe but let's say that you want to, get some feedback after this session. You could take this transcript, upload it to AI, and you would say, "Give me the key themes from this session that we discussed." You could say, "Create emails that will be enticing and send them out to the entire team based on this transcript that we have, for this conversation." You could say, "Create, new episodes and new questions for the next 10 guests that'll continue to weave a red thread of, common questions and common themes throughout all these." Where I'm going with this is when you consider how to use AI as a thought partner in everything that you're doing, you can go 100 times faster on the key things that we want to accomplish.
I believe that wholeheartedly, and just a little side story, I'm coaching my son's 5th grade basketball team, never coached basketball before, and he's gonna be in middle school next year, so it's the one and only year, but I used, ChatGPT to build out my coaching plan, and we only lost our first game, and we've been undefeated since, so I'm gonna hand it off to my ChatGPT coaching partner.
That's amazing. That's a great story. See, that would be one we'd love to hear at our session that we do every week around how accessible AI is because people hear that and they say, I can do that too. I want to bring that to my kids' game. The more we use it every single day, the better prepared we're going to be for the big changes that are coming.
Excellent. So, Joel, I want to dig into your personal life a little bit because you have such a fascinating way of I mean, you make, and if everyone feel that the moment that they're spending with you is 100% theirs, but I know in the background, and your time is important, and you talked about that, but I know in the background you're doing so many things. You've got your family is a key pillar, your health and fitness is a key pillar. You're traveling all the time. As a leader, how are you navigating all of that, and doing it so well?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the sentiment. I certainly don't feel like I'm always doing it well, but I'll tell you my philosophy and how I mentor people that are pursuing a path to their dreams and whatever that dream might look like is the following. I tell them if you're younger than 35 years old, you need to say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. What do I mean by that? When the boss asks you if you're able to give the big sales presentation, even though the voice in the back of your head says you're not ready for this, I don't think you're going to do well. The answer is yes. You prepare yourself, you go out there, you embarrass yourself, you do it better the next time. And that's how you learn through that process. When they ask you if you're ready to go lead this mission, your answer is yes. You're going to figure it out. You're going to do everything behind the scenes to make sure that you're successful. And you're going to push yourself into that discomfort zone and ensure that you're leaning into all of those opportunities as aggressively as you can. Why? Because it's exposure to all of those areas of discomfort that really owns the discipline for us to perform in a positive way when you get to those areas.
Mm.
Now, when you're after 35 years old, the main advice that I give to people is that you're flipping the script. You are no longer going to say yes to everything you're asked. You're going to aggressively say no to everything you're asked, unless it aligns to your key things that you want to pursue in life. So you're completely looking at it in a different direction. I've said yes to everything for the first half of my life. Now I'm saying no to everything in the second half. Why? Because it's the distractions that stop us from doing the big things in life once we pass about 35 years old. The better you are at saying no to things, the freer your time will be to say yes to the most important things. So while it looks like I'm juggling a lot of things, to your point, I'm aggressively saying no to everything else that doesn't align with the few things that I have really focused my time on.
So let's pull that thread a little bit more, because saying no is uncomfortable, and it may feel to some that they are letting others down. How might you coach them through telling someone no?
Yeah, I would say that it- I don't have that problem. Meaning, so
Did you in the
I would be
beginning?
challenged by that. I probably did, and
Mhm.
certainly prior to cancer, I would have. I am at the place now after I've learned how short all of our lives are, not
Mm.
just my life because I had a cancer battle. And the big surprise for me was not that I might die in 18 months, it was that I was gonna die at all. Because for all of us, that notion of death is so far away and really something that we don't really come face to face with very often in life that all of a sudden I had to, accept the fact that I was gonna die someday and I better make good use of the time between now and then. So when people ask to have my time, I aggressively say no. I never feel bad about it, and then I also introduce gatekeepers to my time on top of that. So I don't even I do, most of the time you're working with my executive assistant. Most of the time you're going to be working with somebody on my team, and that's because I want to jealously guard my time at this stage so I can be as incredibly impactful on the few things that I want to do as possible. That desire dwarfs any emotional attachment I would have to say no to somebody else in that long time. Really, just get. I mean, it doesn't even cross my mind to think twice about it at
I
that
think
point.
that's a great lesson right there. I mean, I think if you actually put time as the, the thing you're protecting, right? Everything else, to your point, it dwarfs behind that. And I think the way you did that, you actually made it very doable for people to say no, because now you've created gatekeepers. You've put some stops in there, and I think that's a lesson that people can take away, as they're looking to navigate their journey forward. So thank you for sharing that for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
so you know, you wrote 2 books. I'm sure there's probably more. Is that something you've always wanted to do, or has that been a realization of, "I've experienced this and I need to share this"? Like, what was the impetus behind writing books? on your experiences?
Yeah, great question. Very different reason to write both books. So the first book was born out of this feeling that as I was going through cancer, that clarity that I experienced, the dying have the most to teach us about life piece of it, came back to this sense that wow, I wish I knew this before I had cancer. I would have lived my life very differently. And I had made a deal with God that if I do make it through this, I'm going to share these insights and share what my perspective was from being on this precipice with death and what I take away from it because I did think it was valuable enough for my life to share with others in my immediate vicinity and then to write it in a book. And I just needed to get that out of me. The second one for the Insight Age is much more around what is the template that I wanted to pursue within companies to help take them from the information age, where we have universal access to information, to the insight age, where we now have universal access to AI driven insights and how you prepare for that. I wanted people to have the template for it and understanding about how I approached it before I showed up so that we could all be on the same sheet music when I led the transformation.
Okay, that's really helpful. So, as we think about AI in business and, having a template for that, can we talk a little bit, we went to the Air Force Academy. And so gosh, I can't even imagine how I might have been a better student had we had AI back in the day. But how do you see AI disrupting, our service academy cadets, anyone going through, degree programs? How do you use it where there's still original thought? Um, but obviously, there's a thought partner that is helping you and maybe accelerate that. I mean, how do you see
Right.
that working?
It's the same shift that you and I both experienced with universal access to information in the information age. And so, in other words, there was a time where you had to memorize every phone number that you would call in your network, right? I mean, I sat down. We went to a high school reunion recently, and we all sat down and we're trying to rattle off the phone numbers across the table, and we got most of them out. They're still lingering in our head somewhere. These memorized phone numbers for everybody. I couldn't tell you it's like my kids' phone numbers at this point, like because it's I right.
There.
I'd push a button on my phone, yeah, and I just get it. And where I'm going with that is we're now in an era where memorization of rote facts and phone numbers and just facts that you can find on the internet is no longer required. And we're used to that, right? And so I wouldn't say that we think less. I would say we think a lot more at this era. There's a risk right now of saying I'm no longer going to be required to do critical thinking because AI is going to do some of that for me. And the answer is it will, but much like I got a calculator for every GR that I got to go to. I did a math minor at the academy and I got a
Oh,
calculator that I got to
that's why I
bring
didn't see you in
for
any classes.
I brought a calculator to every test, but it certainly didn't make it easier. If anything, it made it harder. I would have had an easier time like writing down calculations and just having to do the arithmetic because I had something that did the arithmetic for me. It elevated my thought process and made me more responsible for the critical thinking. You're going to see the same thing with AI. So as you think about how AI will disrupt a knowledge institution like the Air Force Academy, at first blush, we would think, "Oh, it's just gonna make it easier to cheat. It's gonna make it easier, to do the things that we're doing today." Yes, it does. Just like if I only was doing arithmetic, a calculator makes it easier for me to do that, and I can turn my brain off. But as we all know, it's just gonna elevate the threshold for what is required of us. And
Right.
so we're gonna go in right? We're gonna go into this next era with a thought partner on everything that we do, but you still have to guide that thought partner. You still have
Mhm.
to point it in the right direction. You have to ask it the right questions. This era is going to be much less about having the right answers and much more about asking the right questions to find success.
Which is critical thinking at its finest, honestly.
Exactly.
Mm, fascinating. So, Joel, I think about you and, when I see like the things that you're doing, American Ninja Warrior, your family is involved in this. How do you see, how do you bring your family into the vision that you have it with a growth mindset? Do you see that that's how your family is all your children are raised that way, your wife is? I mean, is this the way that the Neeb household kind of operates? And has it always been this way, or has it really been since you kind of came to that realization that life is too precious for me to live otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I try to live the philosophy that I want my family to live as well, and it's not the Joel show, meaning this is not just for them to support me and go cheer in the crowd at American Ninja Warrior. My wife has gone on and done physique competitions like you have as well, and
Yeah, she's amazing.
she's
Yes, your whole family's
she's
amazing.
awesome. And she's a regional board member for a group called YPO. So she's in charge of
Ooh,
3,000 CEOs and a network for that. And then she just did a presentation to Europe yesterday on AI herself. And she's going to be traveling to Europe next month to do the presentation in a live setting. And so where I'm going with this is I feel like because of my cancer battle, because of what we've experienced as a family, and we've learned how precious our time was and how incredible it is to experience that combination of terror and exhilaration, all of us lean into those moments. And we don't do it perfectly, and we all get mad at traffic, and we all are lazy once in a while, and myself included. But we try to do a little bit extra step into that direction because it has been such a fun way to live after having the scare that we had as a family.
oh, that makes sense. And I can really see your family embracing that. I want to ask you a question about yourself and what you're doing on a daily basis to be better. And it sounds like you're already thinking about it, right? Reinvention on a constant basis. But if there was anything else you would say that you're doing on a daily basis to be better, and better is, I mean, in quotes, like you define what better is, what would that be?
Right. Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that I think we should all try to do if we're trying to be quote unquote better, as you said. There's a quote I like that says that we vastly overestimate what we can do in 3 months, and we underestimate what we can do in 5 years.
Okay, wait, say that
What
one
does
more
that
time
mean?
if you don't mind. Say it one more time because that's
Yeah,
really
we overestimate what we can do in 3 months. I can't wait for February. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then we disappoint ourselves because we didn't accomplish all those things.
mm,
And yet we underestimate what we can do in 5 years. What
okay.
do I mean by that? It means that if we were intentional about what we wanted to do in the long term, about what we wanted to grow into in years from now, 5 years from now, you can reinvent yourself to be anything. I think conceivably any of us could say I could accomplish just about anything in 5 years if I put my mind to it. The problem is we think in the short term. And so a lot of us think of I need this to happen fast. I need in 3 months, I need this to take place. That's putting the cart before the horse. We need to define what we want to be in the long term and then back into what that implies we need to do right now. That also speaks to the focus that I have on saying no to other things. Because if I have this big, audacious goal for what I want to be in the long term, then I have to say no to a lot of things. And I'm going to take those steps necessary to start marching down that path. And so, what I say to folks is that build that long term first, build that vision of what you want to be in the future that's exciting to you, whether that's a fighter pilot or a CEO or you name it. I mean, is it shoot for the stars, whatever that is that you want to be, and then start backing into it and celebrate the fact that you're doing this. In other words, then people get caught up in, and I feel like I'm not making enough progress and I'm mad at myself for not taking enough steps. I would challenge that and say, don't put the pressure on yourself that you have to do this. Reverse that conversation and say, I
Mm.
get to pursue this vision. Doesn't mean it'll take place, doesn't mean it'll occur. But if I have a vision in mind and I'm taking steps towards it, even if I don't reach it, I'm still going to be in an incredible place that I wouldn't have been otherwise. And so that's the approach that I would take.
All right, Joel. So what is your big audacious goal in 5 years that you're working towards?
But you got Ace's goal. Yeah. So I am super excited about the future of AI. I think that it has a lot of positive and negative implications for society in general. And so I'll give you a quick example. Right now, we've got 9.5% of our recent graduates that are unemployed, which is much higher than it's ever been from graduating college. That's unique. And what I attribute that to is that we're just starting to see the workforce disruption that's occurring because of AI. We're
Mhm.
starting to see the workforce drawdown that's occurring because of it. At the same time, we're seeing companies that are able to do much, much more with AI. And so they're questioning, well, how do I operate as a company? How do I teach everybody to stay on board this train and be successful in this new environment? And then societally, we're challenged with, well, how do I set up our young people for success? How do I tell my 19-year-old what to do to be successful? So when I think about the big, hairy, audacious goal that I want to go pursue in this next chapter, in 5 years, I want to be on the forefront, helping the government, helping companies, helping everyone to continue disrupting themselves and leaving as few people behind as possible in this next era, because that's the real threat. And the challenge is the cat's out of the bag. If we don't do this, China's going to do it. Like others are going to pass us by. The wrong answer would be to try to stuff it back in the bag and say, we're not doing AI. We're going to put regulations around
Right,
it.
closing your
We're
eyes,
going
Marat.
to Yeah, exactly. Putting our heads in the sand, and that we would just get passed by, like, in a few years by our biggest competitors out there, which we know we don't wanna have happen. And so the key is how do we keep as many people up to speed with this transformation as possible? So I talked to, graduates like August Pfluger, who's in
Yes,
Congress, and we have yeah, he's awesome. You gotta
he
get him on
is
your show.
amazing. Yes.
Yeah, and so we talk about what does that look like in the future. He's shaping, the future from a government perspective. I talked to former Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger, who's a good friend of mine, and we go on vacations together. There's a conversation we have about from a corporate perspective, how do we address this as well. So that's my big goal. That's what I want to influence over the next couple of years.
Love that. So, if you could rewind the clock and tell your young Joel, and this is really for anyone who is looking for preparing myself for that long term, right? So maybe it's not the
Yeah.
5 year, the big thing in 5 years, but this is for what can I do today that is I'm gonna help myself, future me. What would you tell yourself, Joel?
Yeah, if I were to go back to Academy, Joel, I would say take this experience more seriously.
Hmm.
At the time, I kind of resented the experience that I was going through at the academy, not understanding fully that they understood how to polish the coal to try to make it into a diamond, and I didn't always see the method to the madness behind the scenes and why they were doing things. And I would tell myself to take it more seriously, to lean into the leadership opportunities, lean into the experiences. I think there's a tendency as a cadet to lean away from those and to kind of look at those with resentment. I remember I did, and I wish I would have taken those more seriously. I wish I would have taken my 20s more seriously in terms of pursuing things that were uncomfortable and not just getting comfortable towards the latter end of my 20s and early 30s, where I was flying upside down with ease every single day and really not doing anything that was challenging me too much. I certainly didn't have it all mastered and figured out, but my discomfort was all but gone in those moments. And so I would tell myself, keep leaning into those areas of discomfort because it's in those areas that we find growth. And growth is one of the top things that we can feel as a human being. Being a part of an elite team is growing together on an inspiring mission.
Well, I know that you are, constantly in the forefront of AI, but what makes you or what causes you discomfort now that you're working through?
What causes me discomfort now is compelling a 2,400 person organization to move as quickly as I think we need to. In other words, right now, the things I'm talking to you about, I'm communicating with them about on a daily basis, and we have remotely dispersed teams. I'm staring into cameras like we are right now, so I'm not sitting in the room with them and helping them to learn these things. My discomfort is around how, as a leader, can I be more compelling about the burning platform that they're standing on right now, that as soon as it burns away, their role is going to be obliterated and we're going to be disrupted by the market. And how do I really excite them around this destination that we're pursuing together, where we're going a little bit faster than the rate of change? I'm proud of the progress that we've made, but in terms of the discomfort that I'm feeling, it's almost impossible to go fast enough in this era. And so I am the thing that keeps me up at night is how do I make this more compelling for them? And then ultimately, I know that whatever themes I'm learning right now to make it compelling is what I'm going to have to bring to society in this next chapter, as well as we try to keep entire American society moving ahead of the rate of change that we're experiencing.
Mm. Well, thank you for that. I would imagine you probably phoned your friend ChatGPT on some of ways to do that, but I think that what you've really shared today has opened, I think, eyes of how we can partner with technology at our fingertips. I mean, you and I were just chatting before this, and I asked you this because one of the things I remember you being really big on is finding time to read as a family. I remember you had like Saturday family time, we read. As much as you're
Yep.
traveling and as much as you're trying to move your organization at this rate of change with AI, where do you find time to read now?
Yeah, so I use AI for that too. So when I'm in the gym, I upload a chapter at a time into ChatGPT for the books that I'm reading, and I ask it to read it to me in the voice thing that it can do. And so it's reading the book to me. But the really cool part is it's not just audible. I'm not just hearing the recording of it. And by the way, you can even tell it talk 2 times faster or whatever you want to do for the right speed. And I'll interrupt it. The cool part is I'll say, "Hey, wait a second. I didn't really understand that part of the book. Break it down for me in simpler terms." And it'll actually pause, explain it to me, and put it in terms that my fighter pilot mind can understand. Or I'll even say, tell me about that theme in the context of the company that I'm in 8x8, and tell me how we can apply that right now. And look at our industry and how can I take some of this to that team. And so it takes a book that was generically written and makes it customized for my experience by leveraging AI to do that. So once again, it's a thought partner in literally everything that I do.
What's the last book that you read in which you were able to take some of those things to, or maybe that you'd recommend to some of our listeners to listen in via ChatGPT?
I just finished reading the Teddy Roosevelt biography, which is phenomenal. What an incredible American, and I was inspiring to read, and I was able to pause it in parts and challenge some parts of the book and say, "Did that really happen? And how? Tell me more about this incident in history." And it explains some historical pieces that I wasn't aware of, and the book didn't delve into as much as I would have liked it to. That's a little bit of a boring historian nerd kind of answer, but that's what I took away from it.
Joel, is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you would really like to make sure that we touch on? Because this has been a really exciting and fascinating conversation for me, but I want to make sure because this has been your leadership journey and there's so many facets to that that we hit on the things that are important.
The thing that I've learned in my time is that the foundation that we receive in the military, whether that's the cultural foundation, how we are all aligned with similar values, with a common mission that's inspiring, the adherence to what we call in the business world standard operating procedures, what you would call in the military a checklist,
Mhm.
effectively that foundation that we have is easily the most valuable resource that I carried into the business world and the teams that I've been on. And I think we underestimate just how powerful that experience is. That it during our 20s, we're in this incredibly disciplined environment with a really strong culture, really strong sense of values, really strong sense of mission. Pay attention to that while you have that opportunity, while you're being exposed to it. Pay attention to how it was built. Pay attention to how accelerated our success in those teams because I promise you, you'll want to someday carry those concepts to every team that you're on in the future. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to leverage the incredible team that we're on in the military and talk about that in an exciting way with whatever team that we participate on down the road.
Thank you for sharing that. And if I could just pull on that thread a little bit more in that just in that transition and taking those to those teams, I want to just jump to your very first transition from military to afterburner. How did that come about for you? And I think that just are folks will be curious on that.
Yeah, so Afterburner is a company that's been around since 1996, and they basically took some of those themes from the military that I just spoke to,
Uh-huh.
brought it into a corporate setting, and helped them to adopt the same levels of positive outcomes. And when I saw this company, I said, "Wow, they've really tapped into something that I knew as well intuitively. That if we apply some of these same themes, we could really take over anything in the business world." And so I reached out to the CEO and kept bugging him and continued to stay on his radar until he agreed to bring me into the office in Atlanta. I was living in San Antonio, and I went out there on my own dime and did an interview with them, and it went well. And of course, the rest is history after that point. But I found the thing I wanted to do and pursue, and then I very aggressively got in front of the people that could make it happen, and definitely was part of the journey for me that I needed in order to be successful.
Yes, I definitely wanted you to share that because I mean, you have obviously you had that experience. You took those things that you learned and you wanted to hone in as you led other teams. But I think the critical piece was you pursued it and you continue to pursue it and you continue to pursue it until you got there, right? And so I think that's a critical part of getting moving forward and getting what we want. So I really am glad that you shared that because it may seem that it's really easy just to make the transition, right? You can check all these boxes, and so you're the shoe in, but it sounds like that wasn't the case, and you had to make a case for yourself.
100%. I had to be my own biggest advocate and not in an arrogant way, in a way that I could show I could add value for that team. And that was a lesson that I've taken and tried to apply since then.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been, gosh, 1999. How many years is that? 25 years for us? I mean, I feel like, this has been a true honor to be able to sit with you. I mean, I've always watched your journey and just really been cheering you on. But I think what's incredible is how you're able to now really give back to our Long Blue Line. So, Joel, thank you so much for this time today. It's been really wonderful having you on Long Blue Leadership.
What a privilege to be here. And I would say, if you had just asked me back in 1999 if there's a dozen people from the academy that I thought would be very successful, your name would have been one of them. I don't think there's another person at the academy who would have said my name. So we we came from very different starting points, but I'm super excited to see the success you've created, and more importantly, the impact that you have on our graduate community because it is noticed by everyone that I talk to. So thank you for how you lean into our community as well.
Thank you for saying that. And as we come to a close, I'd like to offer a few thoughts before we go. What stands out to me today from our conversation is how leadership is both timeless and adaptive. Joel's journey, from commanding F 15 missions to leading global organizations and navigating AI, reminds us that leadership fundamentals remain steadfast, just like he said. Yet, in the context in which we lead, it's always evolving, and the ability to adapt is what sets exceptional leaders apart. His story of personal resilience, overcoming stage 4 cancer diagnosis, underscores that leadership is defined by how we respond to challenges and how we make lasting impact. From lessons in the cockpit to corporate transformation and personal discipline, Joel offers a blueprint for leading with confidence in uncertain times. Thank you for investing your time in listening in Long Blue Leadership. I encourage you to share this episode with others who are also in their personal journeys, especially because it's my classmate and he's phenomenal. Thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. I'm Navira Walkowitz. Until next time.
This edition of Long Blue Leadership was recorded on Thursday, December 4th, 2025.
Welcome to Long Blue Leadership, the podcast where we share insights on leadership through the lives and experiences of Air Force Academy graduates. I'm Navira Walkowitz, class of 99. In this edition of Long Blue Leadership, we welcome Lieutenant Colonel retired Joel Thor Neeb, also a 1999 graduate of the Academy, whose extraordinary journey spans leading F 15 missions, transforming global organizations, and navigating the complexities of AI driven leadership. Joel is the Chief Transformation and Business Operations Officer at 8x8, guiding strategic initiatives and customer experience transformation. Prior to this, he was CEO of Afterburner, an elite consulting firm of former military special operators, and served as Vice President of Execution and Transformation at VMware. Joel is also an award-winning author, having written Survivor's Obligation, a memoir reflecting on resilience and purpose following his battle with stage 4 cancer, and The Insight Age, a work aimed at preparing business for the age of AI. Beyond business, Joel has completed the New Zealand Ironman and has competed multiple times on American Ninja Warrior. His life exemplifies the Long Blue Line's values of service, discipline, and leadership in action.